My name is Denise Harlow. I'm the CEO of the National Community Action Partnership, and so happy to welcome you to today's conversation with a community action legacy, leader, and a mentor to so many. As we go through our webinar here this afternoon, as Amy mentioned, please put your comments and things into the chat. We will certainly be pausing periodically to see what questions you have, any comments that you'd like to add to the conversation, and try to reflect that out to the broader audience. We're going to start off today, and you can see the agenda slide on the screen. We're going to talk a bit about the community action movement and the connection that community action has in its roots from the very beginning, alongside the civil rights movement, with Dr. King's vision and direction. I'll introduce our speakers. I've already mentioned Lois Carson, our Community Action Legacy Leader, and then Bryan Duncan, the Board Chair of the National Community Action Partnership. We'll have our conversation with Lois, and I'm so excited you're here to hear Lois's comments. We'll talk about some of the upcoming things on our agenda. As many of you know, next week is our Winter Management Leadership Training Conference. We are so thrilled to welcome Dr. Imran Kendi and Dr. Gail Christopher with a Fireside Chat focused on racial equity. And we'll be sharing some tools and resources as well. So let's go to the next slide. So as you know, we start off many things here at the partnership with the Community Action Promise. So I'm going to read it, so feel free to read it at your office as well, or your home, or wherever you might be. But we are grounded in the promise that community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And that part that we care about the entire community, and I know we're going to be talking a little bit later about the beloved community framing, and that community action is grounded all over this country, in 99% of America's counties, red, blue, purple, everything in between. We care about the entire community. Next slide, please. We also oftentimes start with our value statements. Many of you have seen these value statements. We encourage you as local agencies, state associations, state CSBG offices to use these how you see fit. But for today's conversation, I want us to start off with the first value statement. At Community Action, we believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect, and we recognize that structural race, gender, and other inequities remain barriers that we must address, that we need to be engaged in this work. Next slide. Our vision for this country is that a nation that creates opportunities for all people to thrive, builds strong, resilient communities, and again, ensures a more equitable society. In recent days, the new administration has issued some executive orders that have focused on ensuring that there is a focus in our country focused on racial equity. That aligns well where community action has been, where we are, and where we're headed. And we encourage you, if you have not read those executive orders, I encourage you to do so. We'll be talking a bit more about those next week at our conference, certainly, but it's good to have that grounding, knowing that our country is moving in that direction. Next slide, please. So, looking to the North Star, Dr. King's work stays with us to this day. His work in the 1960s certainly was a watershed moment for this country. Kind of like here, 2020 has been a moment of racial justice and a fight for change. And community action, again, was born in the same soil at the same time. And he talked about looking to the North Star. And in community action, when we talk North Star, again, we think of building a more equitable society. We look toward building opportunity for all people, which again, when the Economic Opportunity Act was written, was kind of out there. It was on the horizon. We embrace that language today. We continue that fight to create opportunity for all people. Next slide. Love this quote from Dr. King. The time for us The time has come for us to civilize ourselves by the total, direct, and immediate abolition of poverty. We know that poverty is undergirded by structural racism across this country, in our history. And again, we're going to have Dr. Kendi with us next week. And if you haven't read it, I hope that you have will read Stamped from the Beginning, the history of racist ideas in America, the definitive history, and understanding how, again, that structural race and inequity undergirds everything that we fight against every day when it comes to poverty. Next slide, please. And again, this past year, and here we are, at the end of January when we're recording this and being with you here today, the past 12, 13 months with COVID, we have seen and continue to see the disparities, whether that's in infection rates, mortality rates, and today at vaccination rates. I was on a landing page today looking at a data set on vaccination rates by race, and we continue to see the inequities. We know frontline workers who are working with families in healthcare facilities, long-term care facilities, assisted living, women of color. They should be at the top of the list of getting vaccinations. We also know this summer we saw our country's response to the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. And as a country, we continue to elevate and struggle with equity. And when you looked at the policy platform of the partnership, we've included policing reform. We talk, but we have to do. We must change as a country. So we are in a moment in time, and sometimes you hear David Bradley talk about community action's history. He talks about this is the golden age of community action here today. This is the age where we make a difference in community action. This is our moment to make a difference. Next slide, please. So we do stand at the partnership having equity as a priority. The partnership's board back in March elevated what had been an advisory committee to a full-blown National Equity and Economic Mobility Commission. It has representatives from around this country, from community action agencies, people with lived experience. They're helping and encouraging us and have acted and said, we need the partnership to host an equity summit. You can see here the kind of the placeholder dates, more information to come. It'll be virtual, so people can attend from all over the country. You may recall 2 years ago we did our immigration summit in El Paso. This is going to be a similar time of year, mid-April. We've hosted regional listening sessions on race and poverty. We're going to be refreshing next week. We're going to produce and share with attendees at the conference the findings from that listening tour that we shared with the EEMC as well. And we continue our intentional training and resource development for the network. I mentioned Dr. Imran Kendi and Dr. Christopher, who we've had before. Many of you know Gail, who has worked on the truth, racial healing, and transformation work. I'll also say our closing speaker next week is Dr. Georges Benjamin, the president and CEO of the American Public Health Association. His work on equity when it comes to COVID and pre-COVID around ensuring that everyone has access to care who understands the social determinants. We have grounded, again, equity from the national platform stage at our national events. So next slide, please. So I am pleased to introduce Bryan Duncan, the board chair of the National Community Action Partnership. He is also the executive director of iCare Incorporated, if you can see his background behind him there, in Statesville, North Carolina. Bryan has been board chair now for a little over 4 years. I think he's just hitting his stride, but I think his term is up come August. So we continue to turn to Bryan for inspiration, for guidance, and leadership. So Bryan, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Hey, thank you so much, Denise, and everyone else who is on the panel. Good to see you. Thank you for everyone who has chosen to join with us today. I think this is the third or fourth year possibly that we've done this. And each year it seems to get richer and richer. You know, those of you who know me know that, you know, Dr. King is certainly one of my heroes, and the work, his teachings, his love of this country and his desire to see the country come together and succeed, regardless of racial differences, is something that hopefully we should all aspire to. And given the context of what we've experienced over the last year and what we continue to see, particularly most recently in D.C., I think this opportunity to hear from a community action giant is just right on time. It's right on time. So, Lois, Miss Carson, I have to say, Miss Carson, my mama would get me if I did it. So, Miss Carson, it's so good to have you with us. You've been out here on the battlefield, if you will, for a long time, serving 33 years directly in community action, just a host of other experiences. I spoke recently to a local group, and I posed a question that was offered by Dr. King, probably in a much lesser known book or writing. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? And so, Ms. Carson, given all that you have seen and all that you have experienced and what you're seeing today, talk to us a little bit about the parallels from now and the height of the civil rights movement, if you will.
Well, Bryan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm really excited to be involved with you here. The civil rights movement really energized me. I've been in many marches and meetings, and during the fight, just like Dr. King was, my husband and I decided that he would do the sit-ins in case he had to go to jail, and I would stay home. So that's how we've been involved. But there's such a nexus between community action and Dr. King's work. And in my review for today, I was just surprised all over again of how closely our work resembled each other, if you will. So I'm happy that you've asked me to be here, and I've prepared for your questions, and I hope I answered the first one you gave me satisfactorily. Hello?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. We always look to you for wisdom, Ms. Carson, and so anything that you could share about your experiences, we certainly take heed to and can appreciate.
Well, let me share the similarities that I thought between the legacy of Dr. King and the legacy of community action. We certainly both cared about the poor. That was our priority, what was happening with the poor in America. I think we both practiced nonviolent, and in our case, peacemaking kinds of actions. We both confronted power, and there was always creative tension because we were trying to change policies sometimes that negatively impacted the poor. And sometimes that created tension between us and power brokers. We both speak truth to power. Dr. King did in his letter from the Birmingham jail and the March on Washington. Every time he was with power, like Lyndon Baines Johnson, he was speaking truth, and that's what I think we do in community action. And, of course, the nexus between the Economic Opportunity Act, the Voting Rights Act, all of that occurring at the same time. This is the legacy of both our movements. we were both change agents, and we found out we had to exercise a lot of patience in getting elected officials and power centers to change. And so patience was never my long suit, but I learned how to do that because it took time to make these changes. And we both based our work on hope. And whereas we must accept sometimes the finite disappointments that we face, we must never accept, or we must never lose our finite hope. So those were my findings and reminders of how community action and Dr. King's movement are so aligned and connected to each other.
Lois, you referenced patience and hope as two elements, and from a view of history, that time things moved. It seemed very quickly at times, very slowly at times, and patience had to be incredibly difficult, as it is today. Could you expound a bit more on both of those elements in terms of today's movement a little bit, in terms of what you learned then that we could apply today to keep ourselves moving forward even when it feels like things are moving slowly and sometimes in the wrong direction?
Well, it was all kind of new back in the early days, but now we've got years of experience, and we know what we have, and we've got problems now that we didn't have before. But the one good thing is now everybody's kind of focused on racism, and people of good minds want to work on it to eradicate this sickness that's been in this country since the Constitution. And so we need patience now more than ever, but we have to keep moving forward, keep hope alive, and keep going forward, knowing that we're going to get there because we're dedicated to making life better for poor people and making these, what Dr. King called the beloved communities. All of our communities are beloved communities. And so we've got to keep working for those communities where the people we love and are trying to make sure that they're treated with dignity and respect. That's where we are today. We've come a long ways, but we've got a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's well stated. And so Dr. King, Ms. Carson, wrote often about that beloved community, and community action and the ideals that we support, our mission and the work that we do just in our own communities certainly serves to support working towards the beloved community. What are some things that you think that we should continue to focus on as we move, this country forward in the direction of that beloved community that is still a destination?
Well, Dr. King stressed the beloved community in two of his very famous sermons, the one at the Riverside Church in New York, where he spoke about beyond Vietnam, time to break the silence. And he was very upset that we were spending money that should have been spent on the war on poverty, on the war in Vietnam. And the other sermon was called Splinters and Planks. And that was about the hypocrisy of the government in this country, where he said, we see the splinters in the eyes of others, and ignore the planks in our own eyes because we stereotype the poor, the hypocrisy of privilege, and we blame the poor for being poor. And so there's this contradiction, what I call the hypocrisy, between America's words and America's deeds. And so what we have to try to do for the future, I think we need to take that term, beloved community, and integrate it in all that we do, our preachments and our actions. And I think we have to stress through our new initiative on racism what we can do to improve our beloved communities where we all work. I did a lot of work in the name of Dr. King in communities through my years at Community Action. We started prayer breakfasts in his name and got community involved. I was co-chair of a statue committee formed by our mayor here in my city, and we built a life-size statue of Dr. King, and it's placed in front of City Hall. And that had sort of intensified my interest in working more, to do more to bring, to keep Dr. King's memory alive, because there were people over the years who probably never heard of Dr. King, especially young people. So they might have heard about the march, but they don't really know all that he did. And we followed that, the statue project. I got involved with one where we, on the holiday, Martin Luther King holiday, we have something we call Blood of the Martyrs, where we urge African Americans and other minorities to donate blood in the name of Dr. King, who gave his blood for this country. Started out with just a one-day event on the holiday, and now it's a seasonal event that starts with the holiday, concludes with the anniversary of Dr. King's death, and we have increased the incidence of blood donations by at least 400%, and it's going on right now as we speak. So those are the ways in this community we've tried to keep Dr. King's name alive. But I just think that for the future and what community action is doing, I suggest that we, as I said, we use the beloved community as a way to tie our communities together, integrate the term in all our discourse and our operations, and let's adopt the mantle and be the drum major for justice in our jurisdictions, focusing on poverty, racism, and the eradication of both. Now Dr. King is revered. Everybody talks about Dr. King, and earlier in his work, he was viewed negatively, but today he's revered. And I think that this is the time when we can focus on solving the old intractable problem of racism with some kind of new solutions. And I think we can advise local agencies to develop their own initiatives utilizing the things that I've said. And maybe the partnership could consider an award for local agencies called Drum Major for Justice or something like that. But those were the ideas that I have had based on your interest.
Well, those are some great examples from the local level, and you're framing around the blood drive. You talk about tying to the blood that was given, that was shed by Dr. King.
As a martyr. That's why we call it Blood of the Martyrs.
Yeah.
He was a martyr for this country.
That's an incredibly powerful frame in a way that then leverages and pivots toward filling the blood banks, right, with such needed capacity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I heard about a model out of Lansing, Michigan, who was doing this, and it was in the diocese of Lansing, Michigan. I came back and went to my bishop in this diocese and asked if we could do this here. I got approval, then I went to the blood bank. They were absolutely excited because they had been trying to figure out how to get more involvement from blacks and other minorities. The diocese and the blood bank covers the same jurisdictions, both Riverside and San Bernardino County. So it made it kind of easy for us to get this going. And this is our 21st year.
Think of how many lives you have saved through that effort. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at bone marrow and other things at this point now, maybe get it. And it certainly helps with people who have sickle cell because, you know, we generally say all blood's the same, but not quite. There are properties that are needed for other purposes where it helps if the donor and the one getting the blood are the same. I've learned a lot about this.
I bet you have.
Ms. Carson, I want to go back to something I stated earlier, and just to get a little bit deeper on that, and just to get some more insight from you. So when you think about everything that's going on in society today, and you know the parallels between now and you know in the '60s, you know, what role do you think community action needs to play as we try to you know, unite our country and move it forward?
The drum major of the parade. There are a lot of community-based organizations and faith-based organizations. We're the only one designated by the federal government to be the leader in anti-poverty work. And I think that we have to think bold. We're better than we think we are. We need to come up with ideas. The CCAP and the other programs for agencies were bold ideas. We need to find bold ideas that meet the needs of today. And I think that we can do it. And we need to see ourselves as experts in this movement and act like it.
I heard that call to action right there. Act like it. So thank you for that. You've been chair
all
of
over the country, and get our local agencies to step up to the challenge of the times nowadays. We were great in responding to the stimulus under President Obama. We did a great job with the energy, and everybody in the world wanted it, but we kept it because we founded it, we did it, and we need to keep looking for things like that that we can be bold and audacious about.
You mentioned being the only network defined in government, certainly in terms of your history with public caps, right, who are grounded in local government, but you've also chaired, I believe, the California Association, which has a number of public caps, but you've also been the chair of the Partnerships Board, and you've seen public and private caps. But I think it's that struggle for the role of government. And you said, you know, we're the designated network by government. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the role of community action, and it's tied to both local government, statewide government, and certainly we knock on the halls of Congress all the time, and we have a new president coming into office. Talk a little bit about your experience. How do we bring government into this work, and why is that important?
Well, ideally, we should all be nonprofits, but we're not. And the government, those public agencies are not going to go away, but they need to behave like a nonprofit. They need to speak to government, change, and it gives us an additional piece of work to do. And I believe that we can do this at the local level, the state level, as well as informing the feds how we can best do this at the state and local level. We all have the same challenge of working to eradicate poverty, improve communities. Communities that are so stricken they can't help the people who live within them. So that's why we have to focus on the beloved communities that we work in, and that's what we will sell to power, to elected officials, and then show what we can do.
Well, I hear the circling back to the beloved community, right? And
yes,
I'm hearing definitely that frame, and I love the way you talk about that as a national community as well as a local community. Is there anything else you'd want to expand upon that?
Well, it will start at the local level. I think it has to start at the local level. But the partnership is critical to this because we're all in your network, and you give us the incentive, if you will, to work hard at this, to believe that we can do this work. So it's incumbent on all of us to sing off the same page and believe that we can do this work.
Ms. Carson, thank you for that, because I think that's important, that we have to believe in ourselves. We have to, and speak for those who can't speak for themselves, and do it boldly.
Absolutely.
I'd like to know, we've sat at many conferences and seen you come in and seen you brighten the room. What inspires you to keep going?
Well, as far as community action is concerned, I had worked in technology. My first professional job was working with IBM. At the time, I had no idea that I was in the first wave of people who followed the women in Hidden Figures that went from human computers to machines. I had no idea of that. I did that. I've been a teacher at the college and the high school level, but community action grabbed my attention. I love it. I think I was born to do this, and I will have my foot in community action until I die, one way or the other.
I love the way you frame that, Bryan. That when she comes into a room, the room lights up.
It lights up.
It lights up. Yep.
Thank you so much for the compliment.
Well,
go ahead.
It's only true. There are a lot of folks that are just coming into community action. Some have been around for a while, and it's always inspiring to see those who have paved the way and still are around to offer us words of wisdom, guidance, and support. And so, for that, I think we do owe you a very necessary thank you. And so, appreciate your.
Well, that was one of the reasons I was advocating for photographs of past chairs like yourself, and focusing on past chairs, because so many young people come in and they have no idea what our history is like. And I got the idea, you go into any chamber of commerce office, they've got all the past presidents on the wall, and that's where I got the idea. And in Community Action Riverside County, all of the past chairs are on the wall there. And I just think that across the country, the young people coming in, they can't appreciate it if they don't know it. So they need to be given the history. And I know that they do that if they come in to CCAP, but history is visual, history is interactive, and history is what we get through the CCAP program, educational.
Well, as someone who walks by your picture as well as Charlie Braithwaite every day on the way to her office as she walks down the hallway, we feel your eyes on us at all times. So.
And there have been some wonderful people involved. I came into community action a little later. It was in the 70s. And got to know people like Leonard Dawson and, people who had done Bob Cord and all, people who had done so much for community action. And I think that that's what we want to continue so that young people are proud to work in community action and see it as a calling. This is more than a job. This is a mission.
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. We did have a question come in the chat in terms of you've been involved with CCAP. You see the folks coming in and the passion and the dedication that folks in the CCAP program put into this. What are some of those attitude and actions of the younger folks in our network that give you hope, give you inspiration, and know that we're going to continue this fight as long as we have to? What gives you hope with the new generations coming into community action?
Well, they are people of their time. They are the leaders for now, and they are more educated. They are more technology-oriented, and they have to be at this moment in time. And we have to encourage them to stay with the movement and make it better than it is and keep it going with the same kind of dedication many of us of old had. Because if you don't love people and helping people, then community action is not for you. It is not a place to get rich. It's a place to provide service to people who need it. And that's our first constituency. And then the others are those who help us do our work. I had a strategy at Riverside County where we had people who were proclaimed to be true believers. They weren't people that we service. They were people in the community to whom we have sent our advocacy strategies so that they would support us in what we were trying to do. When we needed to go to the Board of Supervisors, bring people from community to support what we were trying to do, and have the strength to go before leaders and tell it like it is, but in a way that will turn them around. This takes a lot of strategy to make it work, and especially in public caps. Otherwise, it's just a bureaucracy. But we're supposed to be creative change agents, make things happen, throw out the old and bring in the new to solve any kind of old and intractable problems. And that's what I think our young people can do today.
Thank you, Ms. Carson. That is great advice, and that you need to love people. I think that is a powerful way to frame this work. Tiffany grabbed your quote. We might put you into a graphic at our conference as a regular slide. If you don't love people, then community action is just not for you. So you kind of have to have that as a foundation. A question came in about sometimes we're seeing increasing numbers of folks coming into community action here during COVID. maybe two things. It's the increased folks who've never maybe needed to come in for help or assistance in the past. And so we're seeing new faces, kind of like we did, 10 years ago during the Great Recession and during ARA, right? We're seeing new faces.
During ARA and even before that, immediately after President Reagan was elected and they changed the whole strategy for community action and reduced the funding. And we had problems locally with unemployment. And I remember years ago a man walking in front of the agency out on the sidewalk, and I went out to ask, could I help? He was a man who never thought he would have to go to an agency for any kind of assistance, but he needed energy assistance. And we're going to see a lot of that right now. And I think that we need the right strategy to make these people feel that they haven't been diminished by what has happened to them. They didn't cause what happened to them, and that we are an agency that respects them and loves them and are going to help them. But they can get back to where they were, because once you've been there, you know how to get back. It's the ones that have never been there, generational poverty, they not only don't know how to get there, they need help. And once their eyes are open and they've learned what to do, some of them really take off. So that is what we have to do with people who are facing this kind of, I call it a tragic situation. We have to help them get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's more than just giving them energy assistance. It's actually talking with them and making them feel better about themselves and understanding that it's not their fault.
Denise, you see any more questions? I've been trying to scan the chat box to see.
You're getting a lot of love in the chat, first,
Yeah.
Carson. Just going to say that. But you mentioned something there that we want to, you want to let folks know that there's hope. It ties back right to what you were talking about, Dr. King's goals, and I think it ties when you said it's not their fault, right? It goes to that structural element that inequity is built kind of into these policies and practices from a systematic historical perspective. Would you want to add anything to that piece of it in today's conversation?
Oh, absolutely. And when you say everybody has equal opportunity, sometimes it just seems like a glib phrase, because if you started off on the road of prosperity 10 years ahead of me, and I started off 10 years later, we're not at an equal opportunity stage. So some people have to be assisted to play catch-up, or they will never get out of poverty. And we have to understand that those laws that hold people back are part of what we have to work on to eradicate, so that people do have an equal opportunity to prosper. We can't just talk about it. We have to help people find a way to move out, and we have to confront folks in a diplomatic way who are standing in the way of progress for the poor, and get them to change policies, laws, practices, whatever, so that we truly are an equal opportunity country, county, state, instead of living with the lies, really, that have promulgated the system that we currently have. Ever since the writing of the Constitution, which has the fallacy of 3/5 of a man for voting purposes, they didn't vote, but they were counted. Mm-hmm. And that's in the Constitution forever. We've had Supreme Court things where a Chief Justice said that people of African descent have no rights that whites are bound to follow. I think community action has to play its part in making people see the inequities over the years and really make some lasting and positive change.
Yeah. Ms. Carson, there's a question in the chat that seeks your advice on, how would you advise public CAPS on working with government to keep the fidelity of community action's purpose? So I think that's a pretty good
behave like a nonprofit.
Mm.
You can do that. That's what I did. And I always, people in community, they knew we were part of government, but we behaved like a nonprofit. We went to the board with things that we had to. We were fortunate in being able to get some major changes done, but don't follow the kind of bureaucracy that government tends to have. Everything is a department of this, that, and the other. Welfare rules that mitigated against the poor, not helping them. And when people said, well, you're like the welfare department, I said, oh, no. Poor people have a say in what we do in community action. Poor people have no say in what their welfare department does. So we got to behave like a nonprofit.
Yeah, that's great.
And we have to provide the leaders as community action agencies. My one recommendation to nonprofits is you are the leader of the parade in your community because of your designation, and you should include the nonprofits in your orbit so that they recognize that you're providing them with leadership. You provide them with a link to federal government and what's going on at the national level, because a lot of nonprofits, they just focus on their own neighborhoods, jurisdictions, cities, counties, but they don't know what's happening at the state or the federal government because they have no connection. We're their connection.
Right.
If you have delegate agencies, if you're a public cap and you have delegate agencies, include them in everything that you do. Let them claim all the victories that the cap has because they are a part of it. So that's the leadership that all agencies can provide.
I have someone in the chat who's kind of summarizing what she's calling a three-pronged approach: advocacy, service, and equity. And inviting all those nonprofits and other faith-based organizations into the beloved community that the Community Action Agency kind of holds that baton in their hand to lead the way and be the convener. Is that an accurate reflection?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're part of the beloved community.
I guess as after today we're going to see that phrasing pop up a bit more in the network, beloved community. So that is for sure. And
the Community Action Agency is a leader at the community, at the local level. Could be in some states maybe a leader at the state level, mm-hmm. And with more visibility and more interaction at the federal level, the partnership should be that same kind of leader at that level.
You talked about the blood drive, and there's questions in the chat about where would a community action agency perhaps start if they wanted to create a Blood of the Martyrs blood drive themselves. And right now, certainly we're in the midst of a public health crisis with COVID, and there's going to be a vaccination deployment need here, right? What role do you see? Maybe you could talk a little bit about where an agency might go to start a similar type of blood drive as well as vaccination.
The first place they would go is to their local blood bank Red Cross, or
Red Cross.
in our case, it's called Life Stream. It's not the Red Cross, but whoever plays that role in their local community, go there and talk about working together, because they may be like ours was, trying to figure out how to get into minority communities, and they didn't have a clue, and they were just happy to see me when I came to talk about that. Then they would form a planning committee that eventually becomes the standing committee that oversees the operation, make sure they recruit donors, meet to find other sites where they can set up mobile units. If they don't have a blood bank in a certain community, they will take a mobile unit there and set up at a church or a community center and recruit people to go in and donate. We have a code that their people can go to any bank, any place, and when they put that code, give them that code, they know that Blood of the Martyrs is to be accredited with that donor. And that's how we keep a record of what we do. And we have the planning committee meets routinely. We have face-to-face with the blood bank. Then we do conference calls and count the donors, the record. The blood bank gives us a final count at the end of the season. And then we start planning in September. The season is the holiday through the anniversary of Dr. King's death. And we take off until the next September and get started all over again. We have banners with Dr. King's picture on it that we hang at every site where we have a blood drive, whether it's a church or community center or at the blood banks. We have so that they always see the nexus between Dr. King the martyr and their donation of blood for people who need it now. It's not that hard to do.
Well, let's pivot to today when we're going to be challenged to make sure that vaccinations are distributed to communities that may be excluded. If we let systems run their course, we have communities who may be apprehensive about receiving a vaccine with good reason, given our country's history.
Yes.
Thoughts on where community action could fit in that space to ensure that all of us receive the vaccine so we can end this pandemic and stay healthy and end this health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts on where community action
and
is.
I think they have to take the vaccinations to the community and work through people who are respected in those given communities, maybe a minister or Mrs. Jones who's always doing something in the community and everybody knows her. But you need a different kind of strategy, and first they have to know about it. Then they have to be convinced that it's safe for them and it's the best option for them. And I believe community action could really do that because most people really like their community action agency.
Mm-hmm. A real trusted source.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Carson. I tell you, that was very enlightening, and it's always such a pleasure to hear from you and to get your insight and to get your wisdom. You know, you continue to teach us and show us the way,
Yes.
and we're just so thankful for you.
And one of the things I say, we always speak truth to power, and we've gone through 4 years of daily lives, And I think that we have to pick that up and see how important that is to the community to always speak the truth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said earlier, I think that's what makes us special. That's what makes us special. And so just being able to have that relationship and have the comfort.
And when you're speaking truth, it always wins out, because anybody who is lying and negative, that never really gets anywhere. It may be for a while, but it has no permanency.
That's right.
Only truth has permanency.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I think about I don't remember who said it, but we have to remember the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And with our focus on racism and poverty, I think that we are the justice workers.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to end this session, I believe. Denise, would you agree?
I would. Those are our marching orders, I think.
Right. I agree. I agree.
I thank you guys so much for having me be a part of this. It has made my whole month.
We look
it made
forward
me
to
love community action even more.
Well, we can't wait to see you in person again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't afford the winter meetings, but I'll be at the next conference.
That's great. That's great. So, thank you so much. So I think at this time.
We had the glitch. I wish I could have seen you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've had your lovely picture in front of us, so we're able to see you. But sorry, the tech had some glitches.
Yeah, that's right.
And
thank you so much. I think Tiffany's going to tell us now a little bit about some upcoming engagements.
Sure. So, Lois, thank you again. You said we made your month. You made our year. You got our year off to a great start. So we're very grateful for that. And we want to encourage folks to register for our upcoming Management Leadership Training Conference. It's still okay and open for you to register. You can visit our website. I'll ask a team member to put the link to the website in the chat for everyone. We're excited that we have a whole host of speakers that Denise has already referenced, including Dr. Ibram Kendi, Dr. Gail Christopher, Dr. Georges Benjamin. We have a whole racial equity series being offered, as well as Denise pointed out, our report out on our poverty and race listening sessions. Additionally, we are just excited to let everyone know that as a result of the recommendation of our Equity and Economic Mobility Commission, of which Lois is a part of, and our National Board of Directors, we will be hosting an Equity Summit in April. That's April 20th through the 21st of this year, so stand by for additional details. And then the final thing that we just want to highlight, because we won't have time to go through all the resources today, is that we have a lot of resources that we've curated. We invite you to visit the partnership website to see what we have to offer. There are lots of books that we recommend, along with Dr. Kendi's books. This summer, in response to COVID-19, we have a brief called Applying the Racial Equity Lens to COVID-19 Response and Recovery. Additionally, if you have needs for technical assistance or training, we are here for you. So feel free to reach out to Denise or myself. And again, we just want to thank you so much for taking the time out to just pause and just inhale all of the wisdom of our beloved Lois Carson, and to just center in the wisdom of the legacy of Dr. King. So thank you all again for everything today, and we hope that all of the conversation today will inspire you as you go out to continue to connect with the beloved community in your communities. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.